Yo, Ash. Just before we start, I was gonna talk to you and NMZ about two great video ideas, and this is one of them. Um, before we start, because I was gonna I'm making a video. It should be out today. Not should be if I had to just re-review it. It should be out in maybe a few hours about damn, about the MVP conversation and Kendrick Perkins and these allegations of padding his stats, and I thought that those were humorous to say the least. So I decided to make a video about that. But for me to roll around in my bed as I about to start my day to see Kendrick Perkins insinuate that um, Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki, and Jokic won the award partially because the rules were changed due to their race. That is literally, and I mean this in the most sincere way possible. And I can't even say that I'm about to not be disrespectful because to say what Kendrick Perkins is even implying is outrageous. To imply that Jokic, Dirk, and Nash won the award because of their race. The attempt to discredit who they were at the years in which they won the award and how impactful they were those seasons. That is, it's Perkins is on the stretch right now of some of the most detrimental rhetoric I've seen on television outside of what that other madman says out there on the other network and Skip Bayless, because that nigga should not be on television anymore after the things he done said. But the idea, the audacity to insinuate that they did not deserve the award. And for those who don't know, I put the clip is up top, but just briefly, Perkins literally was saying, A, he's accusing Jokic of stat padding. I debunked that in my video that will be uploaded today. He then follows that up with today's sentiment of saying that when it came to Nash, Dirk, and Jokic winning the award, they moved the goalposts for them because none of them were top 10 in scoring the years in which they did it. And the reason why the goalposts were moved for them was because of the color of their skin. Not only are these things fact checkable, because he can't be talking about total points, because Dirk was fifth in total points when he did it. And even if you want to argue points per game, Dirk was literally tied for 10th. And then even if you're going to nitpick the points per game, the difference between Dirk and some of the players that were ahead of him were literally point 0.1, point 0.2, point 0.3, point 0.4 points per game off. But to sit here and to say that somebody potentially is padding their stats and then is going to identify the difference between them and the players beneath them is by point 0.1, point 0.2, point 0.3 points off a game. Would that not then mean those players who are padding their stats, would they then not try to just make up the point 0.1, point 0.2, point 0.3 points per game that they would need to be applying under Perkins's belief of what is considered to be an MVP. Mind you, that exact same thing is applicable to Jokic last year as well. Jokic was literally 10th for scoring that season. But if Jokic is padding his stats, would he not just score more points so he could be the difference in point 1, point 2, point 3 would be off? I've never, ever, ever, and I do mean that, I've never heard anyone go on. And then here's where it's even nastier. Perkins purposefully set the parameters beyond Magic Johnson's years to further this rhetoric, and I'm gonna say it's a racist rhetoric, because we all know when Magic was winning his MVPs, Magic was never leading the league in scoring. He was never putting up a bunch of points. You then knock Jokic for defense. Magic also was not this world league defender himself either. He never was. You structuring this conversation specifically around parameters that you want to set, and then for you to then turn around and imply race is crazy. What's even crazier is it may be Nash, I guess you can get the scoring argument off, but everybody like across the board, we're unified in identifying, especially Dirk, that both Dirk and Jokic are scorers. It's not as if like we don't even identify them as scorers. We all identify them as scorers. And not once in any of our lifetimes, not a single year, where we look down to see, where does he fall in the points per game argument? That's never been an argument. And so for Perkins to get on national television and to not only discredit what Jokic is doing, because he's padding his stats, but then to bring up a race correlation between Jokic, Dirk, and Nash, and then literally just last year, he made a comment saying that the MVP needs to stay with the USA born players. He needs to come back home. He need to come back to the USA. That is literally some of the craziest rhetoric I have ever seen someone routinely get off.
I mean, my brother in Christ, he's right. Because listen, a nigga about to win 3 MVP, something MJ never done. I mean, that nigga KP, man, that nigga, he's not taking it too
Please
lightly. His
stop.
GOAT.
Did you
His
see that?
GOAT's
Did you
about to
see
do
that,
some bad.
nigga? The segment, and I know, Swipe won't come here, but give me a second. To give even further context, in the segment,
Swipper wants to come up. Krillin wants to come up.
okay, but in the segment, Perkins had the audacity.
We call this nigga Yamcha, actually.
Perkins had the audacity to bring up how there was a stage in his career where Cornbread Maxwell was trying to, I don't know, give him tutelage or give him some form of guidance and say, hey, man, you need to start shooting those elbow jumpers and mid-range jumpers. And Perkins looked at him and said, man, hell no. I'm the all-time leader field goal percentage for the Boston Celtics. Why would I do that? A stat that not only did I not know, I didn't give a fuck about. Because nobody cares about that. For it's so crazy that there's a subsection of people who try to kill people who praise Jokic because y'all just number guys. Y'all are numbers, and we come to find out those are the biggest number. They rely on numbers more than anyone else. They the most number reliant people I've ever heard and seen in my life. I mean that, bro. I've just never heard anyone ever come up and say some of the shit that Perkins is saying right now. And Perkins thinks that he's moving this needle to let's have this real conversation. Like, nigga, what are you talking about right
He's
now?
moving. He's moving my needle, man.
Yeah, that nigga's a clown, bro. Yeah, yes, Swiper.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you on your lesson.
No, I got you.
Yeah, appreciate you, bro. And again, I don't want to make a spectacle of this, but I just want to explain something. I was going to start a space, but decided to, Lo, you and your platform if you'd be gracious enough to share it with me, I would just do it here. So I appreciate that. I think what's interesting about this is there's two different dichotomies here. On the real sense, Jokic does benefit from white privilege because Jokic is Slavic and he is white. And so in colonialism, you exist in a position that benefits from that. But on the other side of this, in the NBA, we have never, except outside of Larry Bird and a few others, we have never shown a level of favoritism towards white athletes in the NBA, just simply because of the way that we have perceived dominance, we perceive aggressiveness, superstars, all that stuff, whether it be from the Michael Jordan, even if you want to put Magic in there, the Hakeem, Shaquille O'Neal, the Kobe Bryant, the Tracy McGrady, the Vince Carters, the Allen Iversons, and then you got all the way to David Robinson, to Tim Duncan, your LeBrons, and then you get into your Stephs and your Durants and everybody else. Like, we have always perceived the height of the sport are Magic, Bron, and Kareem for the most part. And then you don't get into your first white player until you get to where Dirk is, and then, or rather where Bird is, and then you get into Dirk, and then down the line you get Steve Nash, and then you get John Stockton, and eventually Luka will be up there in that conversation as well. So we have not really given transcendence over to white players because they exist in a black sport, a majority black sport, and a black sport, again, that was built on black athleticism, black exceptionalism, which is, again, that's a product of why the NBA is so popular, because of how we have made it relevant. But on the other side of this, Kendrick Perkins somehow inferring that the reason that Nash, both of those seasons, and then Dirk during his 67-win season, basically, the reason that they won those MVPs is because they're white. It shows a fundamental, not just a drop in intellect and understanding of how these issues actually permeate the rest of our society, but also it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how transcendent these players were to their era. Because a lot of times, Lo, because I hear you argue this all the time, when people talk about Steve Nash, they really forget the offensive engine that he was. And he was basically leading the greatest offense in NBA history over the course of a 3 or 4 year period. And even longer if you want to go further than that. And so Nash at its apex, he was the generational offensive player who did almost anything on the court. But obviously, because of the way the sport is geared, we still had a favoritism, including me, to Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. And so even I, at that time, favored those players because of what they brought to the game, because of what I valued as an individual sport watcher, because of what I valued as a consumer of the NBA product. But now, obviously, as I'm educated now, I can appreciate what Steve Nash brought to the table, even if you want to say the last MVP was contested because that was his best year, but that was also Kobe's year. But what happened is Dirk Nowitzki had to prove all the narratives wrong after the 06 year, because when he got lost in the first round and then he didn't win until 2011, everybody thought he was a fraud. And nobody lifted him up as the best player in the league. And I really don't think there was a year that people legitimately thought he was the best player in the NBA. But in that era and on that team and during that year, he had the best individual season coupled with the team success. And again, if anybody wants to make a similar comparison, if you don't think his numbers were gaudy enough, I think Devin Booker last year in his MVP argument, he was on a 64-win team, the leading scorer on a 64-win team, and people were making the argument that he should have been the MVP. But because of the way that we've grown, I think as an NBA community, we can say that player, as good as they are on the best team in the NBA, that player it's not as transcendent as these other players are. And so I think now we have more of a personal emphasis on your individual contributions to your team winning and how you affect the overall course of the game on an 82-game basis. And Lo, I don't know if you disagree with that or agree with that sentiment at all.
No. I actually wholeheartedly, and that's kind of the premise of the video. I'm now driven to upload because, excuse me, I think the way that we have viewed, and to be fair, I also don't think that it's crazy to change the dynamic either. We are now in another stage of MVP voting history where the criteria isn't heavily relied or based in one direction or another, because there is a subsection of NBA history where it's rather consistent, more so about what you did from a winning perspective, and really for most of NBA history, that's what it has been, right? But without a doubt, especially when the media took over, it's been about where do you fall for winning, which again, to address another inconsistency of Perk, if the logic of what has been the most consistent standard, it's been the winning standard. So for you to then turn around to imply that Dirk did not deserve to win it, and it should have been Kobe Bryant that should have won it when he was the 7th seed, no, that would have been a far greater, and I do mean far greater, exception to what has.
You cut out, Lo. Ash, can you hear Lo?
Nah.
Yeah,
okay.
I got a phone call.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
That would have been a far greater exception to who should have won the award than Dirk winning it, because he was literally tied for 10th in points per game average and was literally off by point 1, 2, 3, and 4 from being like the 5th or 4th score. So to you to sit here and to apply that, I think is crazy. But going back to the rules and standards, I agree. We're just moving in a different section of NBA history with a different section of NBA MVP voters who clearly have the ability to identify your impact on winning reaches well beyond what your team record is, because you cannot control the team
or your statistics,
or even just your statistics. And I think, and what's crazy enough is that didn't even start with Jokic. It started with Westbrook. That's when it actually started. So this is just the next. Back in the day when MVP first started, it was with the players, and the players made their assessment based off of what
they gave Kareem an MVP in a losing season.
And they gave Kareem the MVP in a season in which he didn't even make the playoffs. It was a losing year, but he still got it. Then after that, the media got it, and then once the media had it for a good 30 to 40 years, it's been rather consistent. You need to be if I'm not mistaken, a top 5 or a top 3 seed in your conference, at worst top 5 seed in the NBA, and you will receive the award. And I don't think anyone up until Russ had shifted from that criteria. And so from Russ moving on forward, it seems like the new criteria will not be heavily based on your standings, and they've done it now twice.
And you know what's interesting about this, Lo, is one of the things that we've become better at, and even just if you judge win pace when you play during a season, or even there's a way to measure your win pace now, you can move beyond regular counting stats. And fundamentally, this is I want to move this into the direction you're talking about. A lot of people are saying Russell Westbrook, for instance, like he's been playing well. His counting stats have been good in his first 3 games with the Clippers. But a lot of people are pointing to that to say, well, this is how you know he's having a positive impact. But if you are just focusing on counting stats, then you would think Russ for the last 5 seasons has been an overall widely effective player, and that his play, especially in Washington or even with the Lakers, that it was leading directly to winning because he was averaging 19, 7, and 7 or whatever else it might be. But if you continue to go from there, you can actually measure that there are things that he does and has done to hurt the level of overall success of the team. Again, based on roster construction, all this other stuff. So, again, if we're just doing counting stats, I think we're having a very elementary argument on how we understand what effective basketball play is and what it means to be an elite level team, to be an elite level player, or just a good player. Bradley Beal was second in the league in scoring. Does that somehow make him a first team All NBA caliber player because he averaged 31 points per game? Well, obviously that's not it. So what else is there that helps to tell that story? Kevin Martin, when he was younger, was averaging 20 points a game and his era. So did that mean he was one of the 4 or 5 best scorers at the guard position of his era? Well, no, because you're able to tell a fuller story going beyond counting stats. So I think what's happening now is that there is an adjustment because there's more information. We're more educated than we've been. And then on top of that, the reason that this conversation, Lo, makes me so disgruntled is because there's very real points to be made about implicit bias and about racism. But this is not one of those instances. And the reason it's not is that, Lo, when Jokic won in 2021, what do people still say to this day? That if Embiid played more than 51 games, he would have won that MVP. Did they not say that? Last year, people wanted to give it to Embiid, but Embiid only won 51 games last year in terms of team total win, and Jokic won 48 in terms of team total wins. So that's why that gap was so small between them. And then Jokic had an all-time season, averaged 27, 14, and 8, and basically shot 58% from the field or whatever else it was. He had a 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 500 assists, and 100 steals while shattering all the advanced metrics and all that stuff. And they played like an elite team when he was on the court. So we had all that to go from. And now we're in a place where Embiid is averaging 33, 10, and 4, having a career best season. But yet again, Jokic is outplaying him, and he also has played more games than him again. Giannis in 2020, 2021, he was the first seed the year before. He dropped to the 3 seed, and he had a worse statistical season than he did the year before. And then on top of that, Jokic that season averaged 26, 11, and 8 for the first time in NBA history anybody ever averaged that stat line outside of basically Russell Westbrook. And then he did it on great efficiency, and they led to the 3 seed, and that's without 24-plus games of Jamal Murray. So it's the way that people have readjusted what happened historically to make them feel better about what's happening now, or to make arguments for why Jokic is somehow benefiting from white privilege. Again, when in history standpoint, there's only 4, Lo. I think since Larry Bird now, it's Larry Bird, it's Steve Nash, it's Dirk, and it's Jokic. Is there anybody else that's white that's won an MVP or been non-black that's won an MVP?
Yeah, there is, and it's probably the biggest recipient. Well, there's 2 other players. There's 2 other players
Cowens,
that have, one of which I
Cowens
believe
and Walton.
is Cowens and Kuzi. And I think Kuzi is by far the biggest beneficiary of white privilege because if you know basketball at that time, not only are the players voting, and they were not going to vote for Bill Russell, but Russell was undeniably the most impactful and valuable player on that team. But I don't even want to go down that path. But that I would even say it may even be more acceptable for some shit like that to happen in the 50s because that's just how they just viewed the world at that time. But for you to say that now is crazy. And before we even allow more people to come up and we continue this dialogue, let's take it a step forward. I hear Perkins, and I'm happy I said this in the video. I might have to reiterate it. I look at Perkins, and everything that he says contradicts arguments to why he believes somebody else should have won it years ago, but now all of a sudden it's about race. You brought up about standings for Embiid, especially last season, but then you were pushing LeBron should have won it for several when LeBron was like barely like 4th or 5th seed in the Eastern Conference. Now you're bringing up how the conference matters and the competition, but you weren't saying that when LeBron was supposed to win it at all.
Right.
Then it's about scoring and how much scoring he does. But when LeBron was arguing over Westbrook and James Harden, both of them were outscoring LeBron during those years. And when LeBron was supposed to be winning it, when Perkins was making arguments about LeBron, it was simply points, rebounds, and assists arguments. Now all of a sudden for Jokic, those same points, rebounds, and assists arguments just fly out the fucking window. It's weird. It's just weird behavior. And at worst, or at least, excuse me, it's inconsistent. But I wouldn't even be making. I would just point out the inconsistencies, laugh at them because it's Kendrick Perkins and move forward. But then for you to come up here and argue about how they've moved the goalpost for Nash, Dirk, and Jokic is the most and off of a metric that nobody has ever even talked about. I've never heard anyone talk about where'd you finish on a year-to-year basis on points per game. I've
And
never
low,
heard anyone make
also
that
to be
argument.
wrong about it. That's the thing. It's like these
Yeah,
are
and then
easily look up.
to
You
be
can look up
wrong
all this stuff.
about it. You make it up, and then you're still wrong. You've made up criterias out of thin air, and then you're still wrong about the criteria.
Right.
You're still wrong about it.
Right.
Just for you to get off a skin tone argument, I've never in my life heard somebody this flagrantly wrong about something to try to push an agenda about someone's skin tone, and you're still wrong about
But
it.
the thing is, Lo, this argument started on Twitter, and he carried it on to national television because this started when that Tim Bonton poll came out. And we're not going to no need to name anything like that, but there were people, including people in media, that were also suggesting that Jokic was getting this award because he was white. And my whole thing is, again, if you look at the last several decades of NBA history, it's only Bird, it's only Nash, it's only Dirk, it's only Jokic, and Luka. By the way, every single year has been the betting favorite to be the MVP for the last 3 seasons.
And it doesn't finish top 3 in
any of those seasons. And why? And the reason that people like him so much because he has the counting stats similar to what James Harden had during his peak from 15, 16, 17, and 18. And so that's why people like Luka so much, and that's why they think because if he's able to be a top 3 seed with a point, rebound, assist accumulation without the same level of efficiency, I might add.
I don't know. That sounds kind of racist to me, Swipe.
Then if you
because if the nigga's always finishing high, why didn't he get more MVPs?
So this is what I mean. Like if you're able to make that argument for Luka, and you're basing this on the fact that he's doing it, he has a similar seasonal trajectory as James Harden or even Russell Westbrook in 16-17, then obviously we're identifying with something. Like something about Luka is appealing to the public. And again, Luka to this day, Nick Wright will come on this app and he will say he thinks Luka is the second or third best player in the NBA right now over people like Jokic.
Like, I mean, he said Luka's one of the 20.
Yeah, he said he's 20. He said he's top 20. And there are people, yeah. Max Kellerman said he doesn't think Jokic is top 5. The people on ESPN don't think Jokic is top 3. Like, there's multiple media personalities, Chris Broussard, who I know, a bunch of people that do not think that Jokic is the top 2 or 3 player in the NBA, but it comes back to this idea of the way Jokic affects the game. And it comes back to people have a play style bias, and Jokic does not fit the traditional archetype for what you think is most valuable. And Nash never had a peak like this, and neither did Dirk. And so now you can't just give him a 1-year MVP where he plays 72 games and the next closest candidate plays 51. Now it's the next year, he's a 6 seed averaging 26-14 or 27-14 and 8. And then this year, everybody said, he needed to be the number 1 seed, and he needed to average a triple-double. And what happened? He did both of those things on historic efficiency. And so I think that's how we got here. But I do think because he was never a blue chip player, like he never came into the NBA with the acclaim that Luka had or Anthony Davis had or Zion Williamson had. He came out of nowhere. He came out of nowhere to be first-team All-NBA in 2018-19, and then he went to the Western Conference Finals in 1920. And then next thing you know, ever since 2020 ended, he's been at the top of the MVP ladder when he was never, ever selected because people thought for the longest that Embiid was better, Anthony Davis was better, but it was a play-style bias. But then now, because we've moved forward and because Jokic has gotten so much better and because now we're about to break historical precedents of hating on people, because Jordan should have won more than 5 low. He should have won, in my opinion, he should have won during that Barkley year. And I think there's one more year you can argue for Jordan. He should have 7. LeBron should have won 5 straight with the Derrick Rose year. And then outside of that, I don't know who else has been,
But those years, the precedent was set.
Right.
Like it's already understood. Why did because people even talk about it was media fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
No, Barkley had the number 1 seed
in the West, yeah.
That and not I don't think it's just the West. I think
the best record, yeah.
League. And on top of that, he was the best player on that team. And on top of that, in '93, it's just one of the worst Chicago Bulls season, like regular season.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what it was. The Bulls were not the first seed in the East that year because I know it was the Knicks.
I think they were
if
the third.
I'm not mistaken, they might have been even third that season. So that's why it happened. It's the same reason why when Derrick Rose won it, they were the best seed in the Eastern Conference, and if I'm not mistaken, first or second best record in the entire league. That's why the winning, the level of winning, especially if the gap of winning is significant from first to second place in the conference, plays a way more consistent role on who receives the award.
And to your point, though, Lo, if that was the case, then the MVPs the last 2 years would have been Devin Booker and Chris Paul, and so that would have been the criteria.
And so if Perk wants to, because I do agree with Perk with his first thing where he says if we come the analogy, I come to the party and I don't know what the dress code is because it feels like the standard has shifted. I agree with him, but I think that precedent was set when Westbrook won the award. Even though in 2017 the Spurs, I could be mistaken, but I think
67 wins.
Yeah, the
Spurs they won 67 games. Yeah,
by far they had more wins than basically everybody else in the Western Conference. So the precedent was set with Westbrook. And if you look at his skin tone, it ain't white. That nigga's not Slavic. He's not European. So that's where the precedent was set.
Right.
I just think this is so stupid. Like, it's just frustrating me because I see this like more like people being surprised that Jokic is in position to win another MVP. I said this coming into this season. Last year, because of the lack of star to elite players, it was Jokic and friends, and Jokic was playing such good basketball by the numbers in the eye test that he willed that team to wins. That was his position. And like it or not, the two first teams. The two number one seeds in the West and the East were the Suns and the Heat. And people didn't view Devin Booker to really be on that level of player. And people didn't view a Jimmy Butler or Bam, who also missed a lot of games, to be on that level either. So I think really it's a mixture of, do we view you as a top 5 to 6 player in the league, how you're playing, and how many wins you get. And to me, Jokic, time and time again, has reached that criteria. But also to act as if this season that he's not playing at that high level and winning games is just ludicrous to me. It's just so lazy to say, oh, well, he's winning it because
God.
he's European.
AD is out. Oh my God.
Wait, what'd you say, Lo?
AD is out. AD is out.
You're lying, though.
I'm finished, man.
AD not out, though.
Shams just reported it.
Wait, how long is he out? Only one
He's out for
game?
Thunder. He's out for the Thunder.
Oh, okay. That's kind of weird that Shams had to report that one game, though.
Oh, man, we're cooked. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, finish.
Yeah. I just don't like that because if, let's say, right, say it wasn't Jokic and it was Luka, would Perkins say the same shit? I don't think so, personally.
I don't know. But are we saying Luka just this 1 year, or would it be Luka throughout the last? If Luka's on his third in a row, because
I'm saying Luka playing in this way. Would Perkins say that about him?
But what I'm saying is, what is it though? Is it Luka?
You saying just this season or the last 3 years?
Yeah, I'm about to say because I think part of the reason why is because Jokic is also on his third MVP, and that sets a precedent because there's only been 3 other players doing it that done it before him. Because if we're being, if we're being honest with ourselves, if Embiid had won it last year, Perkins would not even come close to be saying this right now. He just wouldn't say it.
So I'm gonna say this, right? Here's what I think, right? I think the main reason, yes, I think the 3 MVPs in a row do factor in, but I also feel like it's based on how people perceive Jokic relative to his position, right? Like Jokic's play style on top of his personality. If you compare that to a Luka, who is more of a scoring type of guy in volume and has the flashy perimeter play that people love, I think they just view him differently. So if he was in this same type of position, I don't think that they're going to be pushing back as hard. But the fact that Jokic plays a style of basketball to where it's just impact the game, I don't have to drop 33 points every single night, I feel like people push back on that because there's some people who say, well, he's not the traditional big. Like, he's not better than a Joel Embiid because he's averaging this and that. Like, I'm so far removed from, like, the casual conversations, but I understand how they go. People believe that because you see a big like Embiid, who's this dominant scorer, who plays defense, this and that he's got to be the best big man compared to how Jokic plays basketball. Luka scores the ball a whole lot. So he fits that criteria for a lot of other people. And at his position, defense is not valued nearly as much.
I want to. I want to continue to go on the people. I want to be clear.
Yeah, sure.
I agree with what you're saying. I do because I think that's the. I actually believe that started with the Tim Duncan and Shaq plight, where because Tim Duncan isn't putting up a bunch of points. If you ask people about if Tim Duncan is dominant or not, they will. I've heard people genuinely say, "No, he's just not dominant." But what I much rather you say playing style. And even though I would look at you as a moron, quite frankly,
Yep.
I would still understand more so where you're coming from. But as soon as we get to this point of skin tone,
that's when it gets weird to me.
and I'm like, bro, you're really just losing me right now. You're losing me.
What
You are losing me.
can I play?
Yeah, go ahead. You got.
I want to play devil's advocate because
Oh my
everybody
god,
seems to be.
That's tough, Lo.
This is gonna be tough.
So what I will say is that I do believe that I think the media started voting for the MVP 1980, 81 season.
something like that, I believe.
82. It was 82.
Yeah.
It's in the 80s. Yeah.
Okay. And I think where the pushback, I think a lot of this does go to the fact that he's about to win 3 in a row. In a league that is predominantly dominated by people of color. When we're now talking about a media voted award, the only other person that has now would be a 3-time straight MVP voted by the media would be Larry Bird, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I think the pushback that he's getting is because it's like, okay, we've had Michael Jordan they found a way to not give it to him 3 straight times. We found a way not to give it to LeBron 3 straight times because there was this thing called, people saying voters fatigue and things of that nature. But
So stupid, by the way.
For whatever reason now, this doesn't apply to Jokic. And so since the media has voted for the award, the only 2 people that would have won it 3 straight times are 2 non-African American players in a league dominated by African Americans. I think that is where some of his pushback is coming from.
But even if I were to agree with you, the problem though is that I personally believe that there is a very clear-cut reason to why they did not win the award. When Carmelo won the award, if I'm not mistaken, I think they were I've already said the Barkley reason. The Barkley reason in '93, that's one of the worst Chicago Bull regular season campaigns through Michael Jordan's entire career. Actually, throughout his entire career, I think it's like the first 3 to 4 years, and in '93 is just like an abnormally low amount of wins for MJ. And then Barkley that year had won 60 plus games. The other year, where Karl Malone won, not only, from my understanding, it was propaganda being pushed for why Malone was supposed to win all year long that season. But if I'm also not mistaken, the amount of wins between Malone or the Jazz and Chicago wasn't that big of a gap at all. And I think if I'm not mistaken, that was probably the closest that somebody had came to giving it to Jordan. Now, you can argue Jordan should have won it that year because he checked off the winning box, and I think that's fine. But I think those are all explanatory. And then when it comes to Derrick Rose year, again, the number 1 seed in excuse me, and by a wide margin on top of that. Like, that's the reason why they won those awards.
And they beat Miami too during the season.
But Jokic hasn't won it solely because of the winning. He won though, and that is my biggest pick about Jokic is the 6 seed MVP. Now granted we did break that mold with Westbrook, but to be fair to myself, I didn't believe Westbrook should have won the MVP. I personally thought it should have been James Harden. Um, so when we start doing the okay, are we looking at wins? Are we looking at seeding? Are we looking at statistical greatness?
I think
Like
as soon as Westbrook got it, I think that was the next shift or next evolution in determining someone's impact, and it's not just based off of where your seating was.
Mm-hmm.
However, from 1982, whenever the media got it, up until what night in 25th 2016,
2016, first time anybody lower than a 4 seed won.
that was the first time that's ever happened before. And so you can easily argue, especially when Jokic wins it a few years down the line, where at that point the precedent has now been set 2 times, where now there's a new wave of media members who have the capacity to understand someone's impacts beyond just what their team record is. They have a better understanding of doing that, and I think a lot of it just has to do with our understanding and like Swiper said, there's just more information now than there was back then.
And then to just finish this point with that thought too, real talk. Because if we're going by the traditional standards of how the media has voted for the MVP winner would have been Devin Booker or Jason Tatum because
Exactly.
they were the two best players on the two best teams in the NBA, and they both led their teams in scoring. So it wouldn't even have been Embiid or Giannis because they finished as the 3 and 4 seed in their conferences and played less games than Tatum. And then on the other side of it, Devin Booker won 64 games. There was a 15-game stretch where Chris Paul was out, where he basically averaged 27, 7, and 8. And he had crazy efficiency, including a 49 and 10 game versus the Denver Nuggets. So if we would have kept historical precedent, Embiid wouldn't have sniffed it that year. He wouldn't have sniffed it the year before because he only played 51 games. And then last year it would have been Booker. The year before it would have been Tatum or Booker. And then the year before, like I said, it would have been Chris Paul because he was the one that finished off the top of the leaderboard for Suns player during the 2021 season.
I mean, but that's why I'm trying to tell y'all, like what has to factor in this is that they looked at the number one seeds in the West and the East, and they thought these are weak MVP candidates. Like they're really good teams, but they're good teams first before you say Devin Booker's on Embiid, Jokic, Curry, Giannis level, or Jimmy Butler. Like they looked at that and said that's lacking, and the clear best players in the league are on lower seeds. So based off that criteria, let's just unpack their personal impact. I think they were overlooked
I
because
I
of that.
I see what you're saying
I
though, but
didn't,
but
but
I
let me just
well, let me just I see
I,
what you're saying, but even when it comes to winning though, that has been because for another great example is the year in which people claim that Kobe should have won, right? Which I want to say is
That
'06.
was 07, 06, 07 season.
Yeah. So in oh
I thought it was
06,
05, 06.
Or
yeah, oh 05, oh 05, oh
05,
06,
oh
yeah,
06.
oh
Oh five
five,
oh
oh six.
six.
That year, 05, oh 06, bro, as great as Kobe Bryant was, bro, Chauncey Billups almost has the same amount of MVP votes as Kobe does that year. And Chauncey, as we all know, is nowhere near the same player as these players, but he led his team to 64 games, or that's how it's being shaped. And so, even though yes, you are correct about how no one is in the realm, that section of media voting was rather consistent, even on a year in which the guy who was on the best player on the best team in the league was not even the same stratosphere as the other players that he was competing with in the MVP race. Kobe ended up closer to Chauncey Billups
Yeah.
than Dirk, James, or Nash.
And
So
that is why, to me, since that moment and since basketball has been being played, they're giving more credence to the level of player you are recently. Like the whole Harden and Westbrook thing, like those players, regardless of who you think should have been it or not, were looked at to be amongst the upper echelon of players. When you come down to these last 3 years, a big part of what factored into Jokic's first MVP is outside of Embiid, who played 51 games, a lot of the other upper echelon players were either injured, out for the season, or on teams that had lower seeds. And then you look at Jokic, and then some people also throw in Steph compared to what he did for that team. But Jokic had the wins, and the wins was the separator on top of Jokic
Yeah,
being
didn't
at that
Steph
level of
finish?
play.
Didn't he finish 3 in
He finished
2021?
third. He finished
Yeah,
third.
Yeah, and they didn't even
so,
make the
so
finished
playoffs.
third.
and so that was my
Yeah,
next point, and then I want to move on to real talk. The reason why I think that it is more so the shift in ideology is because really also because of Steph, if we're being honest with ourselves.
absolutely.
Because as you said, yes, the precedent was set with Westbrook, but if we're being honest with ourselves, not only did Steph all further set that precedent in a year in which he didn't even make the playoffs, and he was finishing top three in the MVP race. That would have never happened any other year over the
Yeah,
past.
full agree.
That would never ever happen. But let's even go further. You talk about how other players should have won three-peated. Steph should not have been the first player ever to be
To be unanimous,
unanimous.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And
It
so
probably should.
and
It
so
probably was
Yeah, that
Kareem.
2012, 2013. Yeah, Carmelo got
I'm
in first
assuming
place. So
LeBron should have been there, right?
yeah,
I thought
LeBron
it
should
was
have
Yeah.
got it. Shaq should have got it.
Kareem.
Jordan should have got it in '96. So the point I'm saying though is that I think we're just heading into a tide of voters who have more information at their disposal so
Absolutely.
they can make much more sound decisions on who should or should not win it. Because, yeah, actually, if we're looking at it, there's been a lot of precedent being set. Curry first unanimous. And that's because we have the information to thoroughly understand the impact of the 3-point shot, the efficiency, what he does off ball. We understood what he did. That's a precedent set. The next year, Westbrook sets another precedent. Not a top 3, 5 seed in his conference or in the league. He still wins the award because we understand his impact and what he provides beyond the even. And I know he had crazy points, rebounds, and assists, but even beyond that, we can establish what he provided to that team. And then you further set the precedent with Jokic as well. So I understand what you're saying about how it would be a precedent being set with Jokic winning 3 in a row, and the only other person since the media's been voting has been
and just to be clear, though, and I think real talk to your point, because this is a point I've been wanting to address multiple times. But if you look at the only cases that there was ever a real argument for 3 straight MVPs, it would have been LeBron during the stretch where he had 4 and 5. He could have had 5 straight, but again, as Lowe brought up,
could have had 5.
yeah, he could have had 5. And then, but to Lowe's point, Derrick Rose was the number 1 seed. I think Cleveland finishes as the 4th or 3rd seed that year, and they lost to the Bulls in the regular season. And then on top of that, you could have pointed to Michael Jordan. Whether for me it'd be the Barkley year, whether for Lowe it'd be the Malone year. It could have been one of those years. And Lowe, the only other year I would say in the last 30 years where somebody had an argument for 3 straight would have been Steve Nash. Because Steve Nash was on track to win 3 straight, but he wasn't going to win that last one because of what happened the 2 years prior. And so from that point on, when he had his best season, they just basically said that you're not going to get that. And you're not going to get it because you haven't won anything. And then the situations around the NBA had changed. And so therefore,
I can't even say that because Dirk won 67 games that year. He was
right. That's what I'm saying. Like I'm saying just even argument. So even if you want to give it to Dirk, right? But then after that, think about it. Let's just go through this. LeBron won in 11, 12, and then 12, 13. Then right after that, Kevin Durant won. And then after that, Steph Curry won.
Yep.
And then Steph Curry was unanimous. And then after that, that's when he got Kevin Durant. So he was out. He was out of the race by that point in time. You weren't winning anything else. So then 16, 17, that was Russell Westbrook. Then 17, 18 was James Harden. And then you had 18, 19, that was Giannis Antetokounmpo. 19, 20, Giannis Antetokounmpo. And then the next year, Giannis dropped. His points per game dropped. He dropped from the 1st seed to the 3rd seed. He missed more games than he had the year before. And Jokic that season played all 72 on the 3rd team in the West. So outside of the one that you mentioned, Low, and outside of the LeBron era, outside of the Michael Jordan era, there really is no other argument for a player winning 3 straight MVPs in the last 30 seasons. So that's my other pushback with this. If you're saying that nobody won it since Larry Bird, well, there was nobody that's been on track with not just the storyline, but just even the team success and the individual play that comes in line with winning 3 straight MVPs since Larry Bird.
I mean, yeah, but those are the 2 players I am referring to there.
Yeah, but I mean, but even then, like, there's basketball arguments for why they didn't win those things. Is what I'm saying. Like, even if you want to say that LeBron should have won, again, to Lowe's point, Derrick Rose, and I'm saying that LeBron was clearly better too. So again, I'm not disagreeing with that point. But contextually, they were doing what you had previously known them to do. Real talk, they were voting based on winning record, number 1 seed, best player, number 1 seeds, and that was Derrick Rose, and that was Malone. So they did what you asked them to do, and they just went with the traditional method. And then when they adapted from the traditional method, that's when we started getting, for me, better MVP candidates. Because I don't think Devin Booker or Chris Paul or Jason Tatum should have been your MVP winners the last 3 seasons.
Well, my stint wasn't about being the number 1. I don't necessarily, but I don't think the president was number 1. I always thought that the president was upper half of your conference. I'm not necessarily saying you have to be the number 1 seed. But I mean, I see what you're saying.
So I just feel like when you look at the award, you have to look at the player first in context in terms of level of play, and then winning comes right after that. Right now, that's how it's going to be.
And so, to real talk's point, and I understand what he's saying, but it's normally though the level of winning that Booker and even D Mitchell extent, but the Suns won 64 games one year. They were 10 wins above everyone. 10 wins.
Yeah.
In that situation where you're 10 wins above everyone, and you have a volume score on your team as well, and D Book, who's averaging 27. In that type of situation, no, like normally that player does get heavy, and I do mean heavy considerations to be an MVP recipient. And and if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think he finished. I know for a fact he didn't finish top 3.
He shouldn't have. He would have been. And Nick Wright came out. This is what I mean too about how narratives work. Nick Wright, when Jokic won the first one, was so heavy on Chris Paul because he fundamentally did not like the way Jokic plays, and he also wanted to push an agenda for the point of ratings. We all know that. Nick Wright was so fundamentally against Jokic winning that he said Jokic was the worst MVP in the last 35 seasons.
Yeah, I saw that
during the first run. And so, but he would have put CP3 in that spot, who CP3 averaged 16, like 6 and 8 that year. So it wasn't even as if CP3 was having this monstrous season. He was having a Steve Nash season at less the impact that Steve Nash had. But he wanted him to get the Steve Nash benefit because that fit the agenda. But he called Jokic Steve Nash.
And Perk did the exact same thing.
Right.
If you go back and when they first had their first huge push, the year in which Chris Paul got there, Perkins was on television talking about how Chris Paul should be in the MVP conversation, and not one time did he fucking say anything about how many points he's averaging.
It's so hard to have to like sit here and talk about these things because like I haven't watched ESPN in years. Is the popular opinion amongst people Chris Paul should have been in that conversation, or is that just Perkins saying some crazy shit?
It was popular. Yeah, Nick Wright came out and said it. Perkins came out and said it, and then what's the name? She was co-hosting with Colin Cowherd at the time.
I don't know if it's popular among.
Yeah, I'm asking, is it popular between like a whole lot of the media to say Chris Paul was in that convo? I think you're just naming people that are trying to be extra.
I think it's media. I think it's TV.
Here, let me go look it up.
I think it's TV media members.
TV media.
But I don't care about that because they're doing that shit for ratings. I'm talking about the people voting on the award. Was he actually there?
No. Are you asking like, is that a popular demand, or is it just like a handful of people in the media that were just saying that? Is that what you're
because
asking?
It sounds like to me they're saying that to specifically
for shock
push.
Value?
Yeah, like it doesn't sound like Chris Paul was genuinely in that conversation because of his impact. They're just saying it because it's the popular thing to get shock value.
Yeah, no,
it was like a nostalgia type of thing. It was like nostalgia.
I think it was just genuinely I think it was just a handful of TV personalities. But I'm going back to Real Talk real quick. And we can move on to some of these other people.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that, and you're right. Like, yeah, you don't have to be per se the number 1 seeded team, and I get that. However, D Book in the Phoenix Suns last year, 64 wins. The gap in wins was literally 10 wins. 10. And he was a volume scoring guard on top of that as well. So it's like in any normal situation, if we're being honest with ourselves, no, without a doubt, like there would be some genuine conversation about he should have won the award. However, he didn't get no first place votes. So literally, no one thought that he should have won the award at all. No media member thought that he should have won the award. And not only that, the gap between there's a smaller gap between Booker and Luka than there was between Booker and Giannis, who was third. Who Giannis and Luka? I mean, Giannis and Booker were third and fourth. And matter of fact, you could double the amount of points that Booker received, and he still wouldn't be close to the third place Giannis.
And then, by the way, Lo,
stuff like that, like it was a very distant, and I do mean distant.
It was distant, yes.
It wasn't even close.
In 2020, 2021, yeah, that year, the Chris Paul year, only Greg Anthony and Dave McMenamin of your Lakers voted for Chris Paul #1 MVP that year.
And I don't know about Nick.
Okay, so that wasn't no real conversation.
But Greg Anthony is he's an
no
older
one was
voter.
saying Chris Paul.
He's an older voter. Greg Anthony is an older voter.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody.
Dave McMenamin. That's kind of interesting that he would vote for Chris Paul.
That is very interesting.
No. But it's very easy why he did that because in my opinion, I think I would label him as the LeBron guy. I think that's the same year that Bron was hurt and injured.
Paul, though. Jesus.
No, but Chris Paul and LeBron, the friendship,
they're OGs.
I wouldn't be surprised at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just so far gone from those combos because, again, like, the context to me is now they're looking at, okay, where are you in terms of player in the league? Where are your wins? And where are you in terms of statistical dominance compared to every other season?
Swiper, shout out to you, man, because I'm looking at this. Nigga, I mean, even in 2019, Paul George finished third.
Right.
OKC didn't even win 50 games.
They didn't.
Even win 50 games, and he finished third. So I don't know if winning. I think all I'm saying is to real talk and everybody out there. Sure, I can understand that. But if you just look from when Curry won it up until now, the amount of winning has been less.
Your mic, bro.
I think it might cut out.
Low cut out.
But Lo, you got to call. But Lo, and again, to finish this point, 2020, 2021.
I don't know why I cut out.
Steph Curry missed the playoffs and finished third. Like, he completely missed the playoffs and finished third.
But to be fair, though, I think they voted before the play-in.
They were the 8th seed.
Even as the 8th seed, like who's how?
Yeah, but that's still pushing it. That's still pushing it, though.
Name me the person who's the 8th seed who finishes third.
I mean, I hear what y'all are saying about like these finishes, but
that's why the level of play, like clearly that shows to me the level of play has to be the number one thing they're looking at.
Award, though.
Yeah, I think nowadays just like Curry won. I think especially with like Westbrook winning and like a losing season he had. I feel like nowadays they're really not going off of who's the top seed, who's the top player, the top seeds, right? I think they're really just going off of if this dude isn't on the court, will his team win? I think objectively that's how it is.
Like the roster. Look at it.
Yeah. If Westbrook loses season, we can agree. If Westbrook wasn't on that court the year he won MVP on them losing seasons, they wouldn't have won those games.
I think the thing that most frustrates me about this is like it's like people want us to think dumb about basketball again.
Yeah,
like,
bro. Yeah,
absolutely. We need to give Devin Booker the MVP for being a 27 points per game guy on a 64-win team. Like that's ridiculous,
bro. Every argument, Swiper, that I've seen literally goes like, "Well, we didn't do this for Jordan. We didn't do this for LeBron." You're right. We were stupid.
Criteria now, and I feel like they just.
But I think the idea of like us being dumb and saying, you know what, let's use voter fatigue because that's the only real argument for why this player shouldn't be this. Like saying we should apply voter fatigue, like voter fatigue was not always a stupid concept in general, is just stupid. Like if Jokic is the first one to break that, I think that pushes basketball discourse further.
But gifted the again where and this is this is where race is being brought up, is because we're making the exception now for Jokic when we should have been doing the. I agree that it was dumb to be saying, "Oh, voters fatigue. We can't give it to him again." But now the president, and again, I think a lot of the problem in the issue is that now the two people that will be three consecutive time MVP
I mean,
are.
Will did it too.
I'm saying since the media has been voting for it.
Oh, that.
So
Okay.
again, mind you, that when the media is voting for it, this also comes with a media agenda in what they're pushing for. So when y'all brought up Steph Curry, right, in that his unanimous year, it wasn't hard to. They won 73 games that year. So the winning still coincided with him winning the MVP, and unanimously they
Yeah,
had
but
the
they don't win 73 games unless he has a top 10 season all time though. I think that's
No,
that's
I
the
know, but
juxtaposition there.
I'm
That's
saying that
facts.
they're correlating with one
That's
another.
true.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. And
Yeah, I mean,
then
I hear you,
I,
real talk. I guess my thing, I'm maybe give me some more clarification on this then, because if we're using traditional standards, then based on what you're even implying, like let's say we don't move that post this year. Well, if we don't move it this year, then Jokic wins. If we don't move it last year, then Booker wins or Tatum wins. So I'm saying like at
That's just stupid.
your biggest frustration is that they're now making the correct adjustment with Jokic because they didn't make the correct adjustments with LeBron and with Jordan. But I'm saying to you though that based on even the adjustments before they were needing to be made, Karl Malone won rightly because he was at the top of the conference. And then on top of that, Derrick Rose won rightly because he's at the top of the conference. But we are all advocating for that if we have a smarter approach to basketball as a whole, for me, LeBron should have still won because he was just the best overall player and had a better season. And Michael Jordan should have won because he was the best overall player who had a better season.
yeah, I guess what I'm not 1,000% that was coinciding with the like number one seed. And again, that's what I'm saying. I'm not necessarily saying you have to be number one, but I've always thought that you would have to be on the top half of your conference. I did not necessarily the number
And,
one seed.
and I and I and I agree with what you're saying, real talk. And I understand where that logic falls from. Well, all I'm saying is, and I think all we all saying is, I don't think that we have to just keep making the same bad decision moving forward. Because as we've grown as an NBA community, we've also grown with the knowledge and understanding on how you can impact the game beyond just the win and loss column and beyond just points, rebounds, and assists. Right. So we can make the assessment, and even beyond Curry, again, the literally the next season, like literally the next season, and let's actually let me stop with Curry. But no, yeah, let me say that the next season, Westbrook won, and he was not on the. He didn't click any of really the boxes outside of just his impact was so immense that we're going to give it to him because that's what makes the most sense. That just makes the most sense. And then in the following years, players who were not even anywhere near close to finishing, like you said, at the top of their on the top half of their conference was beating players who were on the top half of their conference. So Paul George and leading the Thunder to a sub 50 win team, finishing
Three.
third in MVP race, or Curry ninth or eighth, excuse me, in the West, finishing third in the MVP race. So the precedent, I understand what you're saying about the precedent of third in a row. I get that, and I think that that will be a precedent being set. I think that the precedent being set, really and truly, I don't. Okay, let me say this because I want to move on to my man who raised his hand as well. To me, the precedent really isn't this year. Let's just be honest.
It's not this year, no.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not this.
it's not at all. I
it was
agree.
yeah, it
It's
was really
not.
last year. Last year was the press because I don't think we would any of us would really be having this conversation if if Embiid won last year and Jokic is here today. Everybody will be on the same page and saying, "Oh no, that makes. I mean, my goodness, it's a 25-point triple double on historic efficiency, and they have the number one seed." I mean, we would just walk right into having this conversation. It's really last year, and again, I was in agreement. If you were not going to give Jokic the MVP last year because of standing, and that's because of the historic precedent, fine. But now that I'm looking at it, bro, we've been setting historic precedent since Curry won
year after year
unanimous.
after
We've
year,
been
bro.
doing
No
it.
facts.
That's all I'm saying. Because even with Jordan in when he won 73 games, he didn't. I mean 72. They didn't give him unanimous.
But don't you think it would be some sort of like, I don't know if you can say it on Twitter, but like I already know what I'm trying to say, the phobia. Don't you think it's like a phobia type of thing when it
Xenophobia.
comes to media?
I think some of the responses from specific people have been xenophobic because, like I said before, literally last year Perkins he literally said, "Hey, let's bring back the award back to the USA." That's literally what he said last year.
Oh, I
So I
didn't know he
can't.
said that.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
literally
he
said that
did.
last year.
Stupid
I
stuff.
just like, bro, I'm sorry, but like, it just bothers me kind of because, like, I swear, I feel like it's a combination of things that leads to the comments around Jokic.
I think
Because
it's
I'm telling
xenophobia
you,
just
if
because
you
of the
look
fact
at
that
Luka Doncic, we're
not
not going to
just
say
Jokic, but
xenophobia.
players like even like
I
a
don't
Giannis,
think he
which
can
I
hear
don't
you.
even want to
Hey
put it out.
Jay,
Yeah.
can you
Jay,
hear
can you
Gifted?
hear him?
Yo,
Oh no, I can't.
Yeah,
Oh, let
dude,
me
bring him back.
let me get to quantity or purge because I know he's been here for a second. Go
okay.
ahead.
Oh no, I was just going. I mean, because we already kind of got over. But I was just gonna say when Real Talk was saying like, oh, well, why does Jokic get to be 3 in a row? I'm like, I understand what you're saying, and I can see how you could go to angle. But like I said, the conversation would be able to be had if I seen any actual bias in that. The man is playing good, and the man is playing good enough to where if he wins it, we're not really going to look back years from now and be like, oh, they dubbed whoever else was in the race. Like, no, years from now, if Jokic wins 3 in a row, years from now, we're going to look at that. Our kids are going to look at that and be like, oh, nah, that dude had that dog in him. He's playing what, 7? He's playing majority. He's playing what, 90% of the games, averaging what, 20 plus, 10 and 10, what, 10 and 11 and 10? I just don't see how there's a racial bias in there. Like, the man is just cooking. It's just as simple as that. So that's why I was just saying, like, I could see the argument of it being a racial bias if he wasn't playing good, right? But he's playing well enough to where he could win it a third time in a row. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
I just hate the racial bias component because, like, again, I'm saying, like, if you just swap out and you put Luka here, who's also having a very dominant season, I feel like people are less likely to say, oh, Luka's only going to win it because he's white because he's averaging 33 points.
No,
I think the
I'm gonna
point
be honest
shit is
with
a
you.
lot of it to me.
I actually disagree because
Really?
where they
Okay.
are in this where they are in the standings is because right now they're like they're the 7th seed.
No, they 7th or 8th. They dropped. Yeah,
Yeah,
they keep
they keep
losing.
dropping. If
Oh no,
Luka
but I'm saying if you move it to like a top 5 seed though.
no, but you see now we shifting things around. If Luka is at where he at right now, and they were making an MVP push for him, oh hell yeah, they'd be saying no.
No, okay.
And chat, I'm gonna be honest with you, I might be right behind y'all niggas if that's
Low.
I'm gonna be honest with
I
y'all.
don't mean it in that way. I'm just trying to like put him there because of like the way Luka plays basketball to me is more appealing for a lot of people because he puts up a lot of points. Obviously, he impacts the game in a phenomenal way. Yes, that is true. But in terms of his like score approach to the game, more than what Jokic does at his position as a scoring guard compared to Jokic, who is a point center, I think he's not going to get that same criticism. I just couldn't see it. If they're the first seed and he's averaging 33 points, is anyone saying xenophobia? No.
Well, at that point, if they're going off of, oh, well, he ain't getting buckets, that's Hezzy tween Twitter, and
yes, but that's the casual community. That's my point. That's the casual community.
Sorry, but if you're a part of Hezzy tween Twitter, stop talking to me because you're going to.
That's what this conversation is, though, because the same people will then say Embiid clears Giannis. Embiid clears Jokic because people are looking at points. A lot of people are. That's what the media does a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think I'm probably done.
That's true. But a lot of time, you know, I'm trying to be serious. But every dude I've ever talked to that talks about points can't even get a bucket in real life. So I'm not taking you serious, bro. You know what I mean? Dudes I've seen, oh, this nigga averaging this many points, this and that. We get on the court, bro, getting air balls in the corner. Like what? I'm not taking Hezzy Tween Twitter serious. Basketball is a fundamental sport. Yeah, it gets flashy, but understand this: in order to win, you're going to have to be multi-dimensional. In order to win MVP, scoring is not the only thing you're going to need to do. In order to get your team a win, you're going to be multi-dimensional. Whether that be you a great passer and a great scorer, whether that be you're a good defender and a good passer, whether that be you're all three.
I think the thing that I'm probably most just shocked at is not shocked, but Kendrick Perkins has an MVP vote, and there are many other people with this. Yeah, yeah.
How does he have an MVP vote, bro?
Yeah, he voted. He voted. Yeah, he's had an
Oh.
MVP vote the last few seasons. He voted Embiid last year, and then the year before I can't remember. But I think this is what I mean about like these are the people that are making the greater decisions at large for like the discourse of the NBA future and its current. And Kendrick Perkins, and I'm probably sure he's a very nice person. I'm sure he's a great, wonderful person, loving husband, good dad, and all that stuff. But the issue comes down to it is your responsibility as a historical educator. It is a part of your job to do the research, to do the discourse, to do the communication, and to be a specialist. You are being hired to be a specialist. How is it that a bunch of non-specialists who work other jobs are more plugged in to what you're supposed to be doing with your job than you yourself? And my issue is that Kendrick Perkins is getting on national television telling you that Jokic was not top 10 in scoring during his MVP runs, that Dirk was not a top 10 scorer during his MVP runs, while simultaneously saying that Chris Paul should be the leading MVP candidate at 16 points per game 2 years ago. And he is getting on television telling people that the Dirk Nowitzki, as a historically great player with a bunch of wins that year, and Steve Nash and Jokic are reading their winnings because they're white. For you to get on national television and give that kind of take, give no context, give no analysis to how many games they won, what was happening around the NBA, and here's the statistical profiles while these players were selected for the MVP during these seasons. For you not to be able to do that is at the top of what it means to just be skating by, and it's ignorance. Because you have all the materials accessible to you. You got Basketball Reference, you got Spectrum, you got all the things that we have access to, dunks and three. You can literally look up on NBA.com all this information, but you choose not to do it.
Analytics for the show.
But it's just, you just won't do it. And so my whole thing is, it's a lazy argument for me for you to say that Jokic is winning MVPs because he's white. Because I can track back for 30 years. I'm willing to bet that I could pull from 1990 on, if not before then, every MVP candidate and give you the reason for why they won the MVP that year. And the reasons why they didn't win three straight, from Jordan to LeBron to Giannis. But you can't do that in a 4-minute dissertation on television. It's because you're lazy and because you know what you're saying doesn't make any sense.
I'm not gonna lie, can I hear something real quick, bro? So like, I wasn't alive to watch this player play every regular season game, right? Here's my question for you. Were they saying the only reason Larry Bird won his 3 straight is because he was white?
Alive. I was not alive. I was
yes,
not
you
alive
were.
for that. No, I was not alive for that. I have no idea. All I know is that when Bird was playing, the things that I watched about Larry Bird, they thought he was an absolute dog. And they
because he was a scorer. That's what I'm trying to tell you, bro. Because he put the ball in the hoop at a high level. Like, they value that shit before anything first. I can guarantee you, if he was more pass first type, they would say he's only winning MVP because he's white.
But he also won a title. He went to 2 titles, I believe, during that course.
That's fair.
He played on a Hall of Fame team. And again, Larry at that point in time was the consensus basically best player in the NBA, him and Magic. And people were more affectionate towards Larry because he was on a stacked roster. Like, yeah, Jokic doesn't have Kevin McHale and everybody else in that roster, and Parrish and Johnson. Like, that was the difference. Larry Bird was on the best team in the 80s in 1984, basically. And he won.
I think the big problem was that there wasn't a consensus understanding of who was probably the best player on the Lakers and on a lot of
between Kareem and Magic,
If you go back and look at the what you call it, yeah, it's Matt Kareem is still receiving a good handful of MVP votes, and also because the only reason I'm cut you off because I do have to bounce.
Yeah.
When I went to go, and even the other years where they won it, Boston only had they have the best record in the NBA. One of those years they have the best record by a wide margin. The first one that he won in '84. Oh my gosh, it keeps doing this when I'm on Basketball Reference. The first year in '84, I think they have a difference in like almost 10 games in the win column. But then also I just went back to see Kendrick Perkins. Not only did he have one, but Kendrick Perkins voted D Book over Giannis last year. And the only other person, the only other people to do that are was somebody who's a France and a Spain voter, and then the other one is Michael Wilbon, who's another old head. So maybe
Yeah, I remember that.
it's just the adjusting of the older people, and if honestly if Perk wants to stick with the argument, I have no problem with that because I think it's a very valid argument, and I think it's a conversation that should be had. I do believe that there has been a shift in basketball understanding, and I think that's a dialogue that goes way beyond the MVP, right? Because I think that there are people who there's people in these spaces that we have a conversation, and when we bring up some of because I don't even think true shooting is advanced anymore. But for
Yes,
example,
not.
when we bring up true shooting, there is a subsection of the NBA community that gets upset at that because they don't understand what it is. And when they were growing up, that they didn't matter, and it was field goal percentage, and so we are seeing a shift in understanding having a much more diverse and complex conversation about basketball and the impact that a player has. And so I'm fine with that. I'm completely fine with us having that conversation because I do think that is the ongoing dialogue that's happening in the community. But the race and the point per game average and you believing that the precedent wasn't not bringing up that the precedent was set with Westbrook, and in one year you're talking about Chris Paul's supposed to win it, but then now this year you're talking about points per game, and then you're talking like you're even Perkins on a year to
Yeah,
year
it's all over the place.
it's
All
all
over the
over the
place.
place. And even if you want to argue that Embiid is supposed to win it, I'd much rather you just say, fuck with Embiid. But every argument to why Embiid is supposed to win it,
It's over
Giannis
because
is
of
supposed.
Jokic. Yeah,
No, not Jokic. Giannis is supposed to win it. If you care
right.
about defense, Giannis checks
Oh,
that box off.
It probably should
If
be honest.
if you cared about winning
definitely should
like
be
you did
Giannis
over the
over
past
Embiid.
couple of years, Giannis has the number one seed. If you care about numbers, Giannis has it. If you care about players who've been hurt, Chris Middleton's been hurt. It's Giannis checks off. If you care about games played, Giannis played. I think he's played more games than Embiid this year. So if all the arguments that he's been making over the past couple of years for these other players, Giannis checks it off.
I just
He
think it's
did
funny
dip
People
though.
that
don't say it.
the only
Giannis better.
he was pushing
He
again.
did dip
Last
though.
point, he was pushing while complaining that Jokic is Steve Nash. He was pushing for the modern era Steve Nash to win the award because of a leadership bonus. Because he was saying that it's Chris Paul's leadership that was winning the Phoenix Suns all those games, which is why he had him at the top of the
Oh
leaderboard
Lord, man.
over Jokic, over Giannis, and over even Embiid. And because you couldn't make the argument for Embiid because he only played 51 games that year, it's still voted for Embiid, even though he only won 51 games. So that's what I mean. So it's all over the place. It's nonsense. It's not based on basketball. It's all based on play style bias. It's a straw man's argument. It makes no sense, has no cohesion, and you're paid to do this job, and you've done no investigation. You've done no scrutiny of your own work. You're just saying stuff on television. You can get away with it because they're going to continue to bring you back, and that's it.
I
Hey,
just go on record really quickly. I want to go on record and saying, I do not. My points are my points. I do not agree with the dumb shit.
No. I agree. I agree.
No,
Um,
you just playing devil's advocate. We get it.
and also, this has been a very peaceful space I've been in with Swiper, and so I just want to shout out Swipe because we haven't been up here trolling each other, and
Oh,
I mean, could
oh, yeah,
you
I
just
forgot y'all are
you
mortal enemies.
he just thinks that Kobe's a better scorer all time than LeBron. So that's the only thing we disagree on. That's
Well, I'm
all
about
it
to
is.
say.
We're
Also,
not opening that shit.
I Raquel, I received the sweatshirt. It is amazing sweatshirt. So shout out to Raquel's brand. and I'll see you all next time, man.
All right, y'all.
Hey, Lo, real
Giannis
fast.
better.
The last president would be Steph and KD because they joined teams. So, peace out. I'll just say that.
Oh, okay.
Lo, why would we play AD in Memphis and then not when we need to beat OKC?
I don't know,
I don't.
bro.
That's rough, Lo. That's very rough, Lo. We're going to talk about
Hey,
that later,
y'all,
man.
yo, like I told my homeboy, y'all niggas are cooked, man. Like,
Yeah,
the trades was good, but it's just now niggas ain't playing. So yeah, y'all are cooked. I thought when y'all made the trades, y'all was gonna start turning up, but niggas ain't playing. LeBron out and AD's out.
yeah.
Y'all cooked.
Wait a minute. So, who's the best player for y'all tonight, then?
If D'Lo comes back, then yeah, D'Lo maybe. But
Yeah, I'm about to say probably Russell.
Peace
Y'all
out, man.
Lakers fans, man.
I'll take it over.